General Manoj Mukund Naravane has informally informed the government that he did not leak the transcript or the manuscript. Now, I just can't understand how can a clear-cut carte blanche be a hot potato for allegedly the army chief. Prime Minister believes in giving operational freedom to the armed forces and with his total support. Even before Operation Sindoor happened, he told the armed forces chiefs before the entire operation कि समय, दिन, टारगेट आप चूज करिए. During Operation Sindoor, during Operation Balakot, during Uri surgical strike, the armed forces, believe you me, had full freedom. You can't play politics with war, so to speak. And Prime Minister was keeping his distance by saying, do what you have to do. Do you what you need to do.
If you were hoping the opposition would have utilized a budget session to point out misses in the budget or ask the government questions on Delhi's air quality or on the US-India trade deal, you must be disappointed because the opposition pulled a rabbit out of their hat. Suddenly, an unpublished book became the center of attention. Yes, the entire hullabaloo in the parliament has been over an unpublished book, which remains unquoted as whatever was mentioned on the floor has been expunged from the parliamentary record. The author hasn't spoken on the opposition's interpretation of the excerpts from his book either. And the book at the center of the controversy, 4 Stars of Destiny, General Naravane, written by former Indian Army chief who led the army during the confrontation with China in 2020. To discuss some of the issues raised by the opposition based on the unpublished book, the merit in the opposition's arguments, the timing and the manner of raising this issue, I am joined by Shishir Gupta, Executive Editor, Hindustan Times. Thank you for taking out the time, sir. Very important issue. And opposition has been trying to raise this again and again. Immediately after, the budget was presented by the finance minister, public's hope was that, questions which are relevant and important for public will be raised in the parliament. But the opposition, especially the LOP, decided that the question that he has on his mind right at the top of his head is, of course, about a book which is not published yet. First of all, what do you make of, this issue being raised in the parliament while budget session immediately after the budget? So especially the timing of it, and then we will talk about the substance of the charges which have been leveled by the LOP.
See, it's the role of opposition to play the role of opposition. So opposition is obviously going to throw stones at the government. There's nothing new in that. So opposition is not wrong when it does that. But what I know of it is that the book is still under vetting by the Ministry of Defence. What I know is that General Manoj Mukund Naravane has informally informed the government that he did not leak the transcript or the manuscript. And what I know is that whatever has been published, I cannot verify or say anything about it. So this is where it lies actually, right? Now, opposition obviously wants to corner the government because, they want to show that the government has been weak on the National Security Fund, particularly after the success of Operation Sindoor. So you'll try and pull the government down, the Narendra Modi government down, and the best bet is to pull the government down on something involving China. This is where it stands.
Right.
Okay.
Now, let's talk about the substance and the quotes which were made at the parliament by the LOP. And the reason I'm saying allegedly because the book is not with anybody. The LOP, did show that book in the parliament, but we don't know what's in the book. Having said that, what's in the report is, of course, there's one phrase, which is "jo uchit samjhe kare." Basically, this was being interpreted by the LOP as the government being clueless on the matter and thus not passing on any categorical instructions down to, General Naravane, who was, of course, leading the Indian Army at that point in time. Now, the question, sir, is, in such a scenario, who decides? Is it the political leadership which decides what needs to be done on the ground? Is it the military commander who decides what needs to be done on the ground? First, let's just get that out of the way.
At the outset, I don't want to talk about the book per se, because the book is still unpublished and the manuscript is still not available in the public domain. Now, coming to the question about जो उचित समझें वो करें. Now, I'll take you back to Doklam. In Doklam, I am told that at that particular point of time, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, then Foreign Secretary S. Jaishankar, and then Army Chief General Bipin Rawat, I am told, went up to the Prime Minister and told the Prime Minister, this is 2017, that the Chinese are planning to cross Torsa Nala on the Doklam Plateau. The Prime Minister heard everything. And then the Prime Minister said, तो फिर आप मुझसे क्या पूछ रहे हैं? Essentially telling them to do what they deem fit. Prime Minister believes in giving operational freedom to the armed forces and with his total support. Cut to Operation Sindoor. Even before Operation Sindoor happened. Now, this you'll have to check with the Armed Forces Chief or whosoever was there. He told the Armed Forces Chief before the entire operation कि समय, दिन, target आप choose करिए. Now, I just can't understand how can a clear-cut carte blanche be a hot potato for allegedly the army chief. I mean, what did they expect? The Prime Minister to take an AK-47 and start fighting? Last time, when somebody tried to dictate the Indian Armed Forces on the battlefield through a general who was more political than military was in 1962, and you know what happened there. So let's be very clear that the Prime Minister did the right thing. If at all, he said the same thing to him. During Operation Sindoor, during Operation Balakot, during Uri surgical strike, the armed forces, believe you me, had full freedom. And if the Prime Minister is telling the army chief, who has 35 years minimum of combat experience, to do what he deems fit, what's wrong in that? It is for the army chief to take a call. It does not reflect anything negative on the Prime Minister. I don't want to say who does it reflect negatively on, but this is what it is. So the Prime Minister has been very clear. During Operation Sindoor, he was totally clued into the entire situation, but he did not give any military directions. It was again NSA, it was CDS, it was the three armed forces chief. And they did what they had to do. He didn't tell them to aim the BrahMos at that place. He didn't tell them to aim the BrahMos in the other place. He didn't tell them to sort of fire a rampage or a scalp or a hammer missile. He said, do what you deem fit. And what to talk of that? I mean, I think in 2018 somewhere, when there was a DGs and IGPs conference, the Prime Minister said very clearly, he says, अगर आप देश हित में कुछ भी करेंगे, मैं आपके साथ हूँ. What more can you say? I mean, if you give me a total operational freedom and then I say, listen, why did you give me operational freedom? I just can't understand. So it is very wrong for a political leader to play a military leader and vice versa also. And you've seen it in 1962. You ran the battle through Lieutenant General Brij Mohan Kaul, who was lying flat on the bed on 5 Motilal Nehru Marg and running the battle. And that's what has happened. Military commanders need freedom. In 1962, it was General Daulat Singh who decided, who didn't ask anybody, who took 2 battalions all the way up to East Ladakh to ensure that Leh was safe. It was General Sagat Singh who was told not to roll into Dhaka. He said, to hell with it. And he moved in. And he won the battle. So military freedom is very important. but so is military accountability. And that is the key to the entire thing. So I don't see anything wrong in what the Prime Minister said. And there are other allegations which have been made, which are equally wrong, because unfortunately, I was awake at that time when the battle was taking place, on August 29, 31st. So we all know what has happened. But then, I'm not disputing the former army chief, because army is a revered institution. I'm not touching the army. I'm not even saying anything about the general. But the fact remains is, nobody gave any instructions not to do this or not to do that. In Operation Sindoor, it was very clear. You have done Pahalgam, you will pay through your terrorist camps. Rest the targets, they decided. I mean, there were many a times when the Pakistanis got back to say that, listen, you are attacking, we will retaliate. The instructions were very clear. Go ahead, do what you want to do. Yeah. So what could be bigger than jo uchit hai wo aap kare? I mean, nothing could be bigger than that. So and I am pretty sure what happened at Rechinla or Rezangla, right? I am pretty clear on who deployed the Special Frontier Force and how the Chinese got very upset with that. Yeah. It was General Bipin Rawat and the Secretary RW, Samant Goel, who did that. So, it's not very good to leak out operational details which are classified and which have ramifications. I mean, if the army chief has spoken,
he has not reacted yet. He has not said anything.
If he's spoken and if he's written a book or whatever he has done, my understanding is that he has not written in such terms. No. He is written in more bland terms, as I am told. Yeah. I do not know.
I'll come to it, sir, because some of those excerpts, sir, are out in the public. So there is no point in sort of, not discussing them. I'll just mention a line or two. But before I do that, some of the examples that you gave, right from 62, all the way to what happened in 2018, there is also the example of Field Marshal Manik Shaw, when, Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister, gave the clear instruction that, listen, this is what we need to do. He told the Prime Minister that, if we decide to go in now, chances are we'll lose the battle, because we're talking about monsoon times. It was not the ideal time. In other words, the mandate was given by the political leadership, but the operational, whatever needed to be done on the ground, was decided by the military chief, and rightly so.
You see, if you go through the Indian history of warfare, only a fool will tell you that Indians fought the battle during monsoon. Whether it was pre-Mughal, post-Mughal, or even the British, nobody fought the battle during monsoon. Yeah. Battles were normally fought after harvest. It was in the winters the battle fought, right? So, I mean, you have to, that's why I'm saying you have to give operational freedom to the military leader, because he is the one who is going to fight. It's not the Prime Minister who is going to fight, for God's sakes.
Right.
So, he's not going to take a tank up to Rechinla. So, I think it's just a manufactured controversy which is trying to sort of, get political mileage out of it. But it's going to sadly fail, because the point remains is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is somebody who really respects the armed forces. And he's one person who believes in giving full support and letting them do their job. That's where it is. Anything other than that, I don't think so. That's the reality. So I'm pretty clear what happened on the north bank of Pakong So. I'm pretty clear what happened on the south bank of Pakong So. But let me tell you, if the south bank operation did not take place, right, you wouldn't have recovered any territory in the north bank.
Right. Before I talk about the code, I want to talk about the code, and I will talk about the code. But before I do that, one more question to you, sir, because the book is out there in the sense that the LOP at least has access to the book. He was showing it in the parliament. Do you think it's a grave error on the part of the publisher? Because the book could only be with two people. With the general, who has clearly said that it's not come from him, the leaks not come from him, then it's come from the publisher, likely, that's the likelihood. In such a scenario, if that is found out, is the government prepared to take action against the publisher? Or should the government take action against publisher? Because, and the reason I ask you this question is because, like you said, the book is still being vetted, by the MOD. And the book may have, because it is written by former army chief, certain details which may or may not need to be out at this point in time, and that hasn't been decided upon yet.
See, it is for the government to take a decision whether it wants to probe as to whether the book has been leaked or not leaked. If it has operational details, it is for the government to take a call, right? It is for the government to talk to the publisher, whosoever it is, the government to talk to General Naravane, so on and so forth. But let me tell you something else. there is a report on the 62 war called Henderson-Brooks reports.
Yes.
Right? There are only 2 copies of Henderson-Brooks report available, which are sort of, now yellowed out and sort of going in pieces. One is in the locker of the Defense Secretary and one is in the locker of the Army Chief. There is very little of relevance in the main Henderson-Brooks report, in the sense it talks about military operations, how they could have been conducted, whatever it is. But there is a 16-page note, which is a foreword by General J.N. Chaudhary, and in which he castigates the then government, the then defense minister, of trying to interfere with the functioning of the Indian Army. That report is still secret. That report is still classified. That report has never been leaked. Right? Now, here there is a larger question in this. I am not into who writes a book or who doesn't write a book. It's for the government to decide, or whosoever it is. But suppose if tomorrow the National Security Advisor decides to write a book. Suppose tomorrow the RRW chief decides to write a book. Well, one of them has written, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
Suppose the Intelligence Bureau chief decides to write a book. Right? Then, are you kosher with these people leaking out operational details which are relevant? Or is it come to that the government, before appointing a commander, decides that they should sign a non-disclosure agreement? So the point is, it's for the government to probe it. But it's very clear that the moment a political leadership interferes in the military theatre, in a warlike situation, things really go awry. I mean, you can't play politics with war, so to speak. And Prime Minister was keeping his distance by saying, do what you have to do. Do what you need to do. Rajnath Singh also made it very clear by saying what was the ambit of the operation, when he said, when he quoted Lord Hanuman by saying, Jin mohi mara, te main mare. Those who attacked me, I killed them. So basically it was an counter-terror operation that was taken place during Operation Sindoor. During May 2020, it was an operation to push back the PLA expansion, which came all the way from Galwan down to Pagonso, and that the government did it very well. Let me say that to you. You can blame this government for many things, but I'm sorry, it's very difficult to blame this government on national security issues. They take it very seriously.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much this is resonating on the ground, especially because, like I said, this happened during the budget session. People had other things on their mind. I mean, all kinds of cuts, trade deals, so on and so forth. But this is what we're talking about. And of course, another session got washed out, was adjourned. Opposition, especially at this point in time, wants to talk about this issue. So let us now get back to whatever is available in the public domain, what has been said by the LOP, and let's get back to the book itself, which, by the way, is unpublished, isn't out there yet. So Rahul Gandhi said on the subject that Naravane ji has clearly said in this that he felt alone and was abandoned by the entire establishment. But excerpts from this book, which I have also seen because they're out there in various reports, as they have been quoted, clearly show that this is his interpretation. Rahul Gandhi's interpretation, not really what the chief has said. Because if I would quote the quote which is out there from the unpublished book, it says something like this: I conveyed the criticality of the situation to the Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh, who said he would get back to me, which he did by about 22-30 hours. He said that he had spoken to the PM and that it was purely a military decision. Jo uchit samjho, wo karo, unquote. Then the chief goes on to say, and this is the operative part, which I think, in my opinion, quote, I had been handed a hot potato. You mentioned this, you refer to this as well. With this carte blanche, the onus was now totally on me. I took a deep breath and sat silently for a few minutes, unquote. Now, has the opposition got the entire thing completely wrong? Because here, in the very next line, after Jo uchit samjho karo, the chief is saying that I had been handed a hot potato. With this carte blanche, the onus was not totally on me. Carte blanche, what does it mean? It doesn't insinuate abandonment, which is what Rahul Gandhi was referring to at all. So, do you think this just indicates that the Prime Minister, the Raksha Mantri, was in fact empowering the chief, as we were talking about earlier, instead of the interpretation which the opposition wants everybody to believe. Carte blanche. In the very next line.
You are the army chief. You have nearly more than 1 million men under you. You have the advice of your then Northern Army commander. You have the advice of your then division commander. You have the advice of your then brigadier commander. You have advice of your battalion commander. You have advice of your company commander. How are you alone? I just can't understand. Again, as I said, I am not casting any aspersions on General Naravane. I am not casting any aspersions on the Indian Army. I am just simply saying that if anybody thinks who has been quoted to be alone, I mean, how are you alone? I mean, you have
Perhaps he was talking about the gravity of the responsibility he felt on his shoulders, and which is understandable, sir. Whenever you're making a massive decision in life, a big decision which is going to have repercussions, beyond your control, you could feel, perhaps in that moment a little alone. But is it to say that you've not been given the power? Because in the very next line, he himself, in his own words, is saying very clearly, carte blanche. In other words, he was given the power to do as he deemed fit, being the military commander who has an experience of 35 years. Of course, the man knew what he was supposed to do, knew his job. Because clearly what happened after that.
No, Abhishek, so what do you what did he want the Prime Minister to do? Did he want the Prime Minister to take a howitzer and start firing at the Chinese in East Ladakh?
That's perhaps what Rahul Gandhi expects.
Well, that is for... See, I have nothing to say about Rahul Gandhi because he's an opposition leader. He will attack the government for whatever he gets. Right? He has to fight an election to win an election. That's what his job is.
Right.
I am saying if you are going into this very business, I mean, what do you expect the Prime Minister to do? What do you expect Raksha Mantri to do? I mean, you want the Prime Minister who's in his 70s to go and fight? Or you want the Raksha Mantri who is also in his 70s to fight? What do you want him to do? I mean, he's empowered you. And you are paid for this job, for God's sakes. You are the army chief.
My argument is that it is just a misinterpretation by the opposition. Because he doesn't seem to say what the opposition is saying the chief said. It's not there.
Well, it's about time that General Naravane then came out in the public and said what he had to say. That's where it is. I mean, it is for him to clear out the entire thing. It is not for the Prime Minister to say anything because he will not say a word against the army. He'll never say, Rajnath Singh will never say a word against the army. But the point is for General Naravane, if he thinks he's been wronged, he should say that. But let me say that nothing could be bigger than this. It's a clear-cut thing, mandate. Go ahead, do what you want to do. I mean, what do you want me to do? I mean, you are the army chief. Is supposed to. It's a hallowed institution in India. I mean, you've been given everything, what you want. I mean, this time, the armed forces have got a 22% increase in the capital expenditure. It's got a 24% increase in the capital outlay. What else do you want? It's 2% of the GDP for the first time. And even after all this, you say you're not empowered. God help you then. I'm sorry, God help India.
I'll keep maintaining. I'm not sure the chief said it anyway. Of course, he does need to sort of...
It is for the chief to clarify. As I said very clearly, I have not a word to say against General Naravane. I have not a word to say against the Indian Army. Opposition is doing what it wants to do. But whatever has come out puts, not the political leadership in shade. Because political leadership comes out very clear in this. It is for the person who's cast an accusation, if he's cast one, to clarify.
I don't think so. I think he was just patting himself on the back, in his book because...
Listen,
which wasn't a bad thing to do, sir.
Hold on.
Yeah.
He's been saying two things.
Yeah.
The book says something, while at that time when you see his videos, his interviews, he says that he's not given an inch of land.
Yes.
So how does the two sort of match?
Which is why I'm maintaining that I think the opposition misinterpreted his quote altogether to their own political gain to make this an issue, because as you were mentioning earlier, that this government's record, which it has been very proud of, is that it has been doing some great work as far as nation's defense is concerned. Prime Minister on previous multiple occasions, along with other ministers as well, have said that जो उचित समझे कीजिए, this type के statement is not the only time this has been made, in the sense that Operation Sindoor के time रक्षा मंत्री has said this, that हमने full freedom दी है हमारे armed forces को, जैसे चाहें वो पाकिस्तान से वैसे निपटें. You know, I'm paraphrasing, of course, it's not an exact quote, but this has been communicated multiple times by the Prime Minister, by the Raksha Mantri, by other ministers. So in other words, what's new in this?
I have seriously nothing more to add. The only thing I can tell you is that, the current political leadership, I mean, if you look at the facts of the case, I mean, before 2014, I mean, we were even afraid to make roads along the LSE.
Absolutely.
Oh, for God's sake, what are we talking about? I mean, I remember one time very vividly, and I'll recall that to you. This was way back in 2003, that, the topic of, building roads along the 3,488 kilometer LSE came out, right? And that particular point of time, there was a meeting of the China study group in which the Home Secretary, then Home Secretary, his name was Anil Baijal, who later on became the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. He said, then why aren't we building roads? The meeting was attended by the Vice Chief. He said, but sir, the Chinese may come in. So then he said, if that is the case, then we might as well stop building roads in Delhi. Right. So, I mean, here is this government which is doing everything to really boost up, beef up the border infrastructure. As far as, China goes, as far as Pakistan goes, here is this government that stood up to Chinese on Doklam Plateau, which was a battle between Bhutan and this. Here is the government which is actually now deciding to build an underground railway to protect its Siliguri corridor. Here is this government which has actually moved the missiles in Arunachal Pradesh, the BrahMos missiles. So it just doesn't gel. Opposition can say whatever it wants to say, but again, as I said, whosoever has made the allegation, he needs to clarify. It's not for me to do that.
And I would like to wrap this up, by saying what I think, may have happened here. And that is that I think the general was just patting himself on the back a little bit, and he's allowed to, because of course the man clearly led the Indian army against the Chinese. And maybe the words could have been chosen a little better, but unko jo uchit laga wo unhone likha, और opposition के leader को जो उचित लगा वो उन्होंने allegation सरकार पर लगा दिया. तो with that said, as you mentioned,
see, there is a saying of Bismarck.
Yeah.
That the less people know how sausages are made, the better they sleep at night. I don't want to say a word beyond that.
All right, sir. But on that note, thank you so much for taking out the time and, of course, talking about this particular issue, because it is a hot potato for sure.